Welcome to White Guys for Kamala Election Eve Edition. I am your host, John Ennis. This is my co-host, Morley, and we are coming to you down under the wire while people are still getting their votes in and probably waiting in line, and Kamala Harris is putting on Coachella-level music events across Pennsylvania. So we thank you for joining us in these last few hours of the dizzying 2024 campaign, and we hope you've already voted. We were just talking before about making sure that we voted and bugging other people to vote. I was going to say it's actually interesting to see that Steve Bannon and I think it was like Lauren Boebert or someone on his podcast were like, what's with these long lines for voting? Like working class people don't have time to go vote, like wait in lines for all this to vote. Like what's going on? And it's just like, wow, where have you been for 20 years, man? Jesus Christ. This
Well, a
was the
good portion of
game.
it was prison, right? I mean,
Yeah, this was the Republican game, was to make it harder to vote and
right,
to try to because they realized like, well, the fewer people that vote, the better our odds are because we're not popular. So we don't want democracy so much. We like republics. That's why we're Republicans
right.
that have, just the people that we like to vote. So but it's been interesting to see like even America First Works, which is like a far right pack. They were posting like, stay in line to make sure your vote's counted. Talk to someone else. It looked like a Democratic GOTV account, and I've been bugging them and the Heritage Foundation. I've been tearing the Heritage Foundation a new one since we've basically started this campaign, calling out their crap because they're always lying in their posts. And nobody else comments. It's amazing how sad their Instagram account is. It'll be like, 5, 12 likes, and then me pointing it out. And someone even finally said, like, I love how the only person who comments on this account is calling out their lies every time. But when they're doing the get out the vote stuff to try to make it easier to vote for people, you're like, well, wait a minute. I think we're getting somewhere here. Like, I wouldn't criticize you posting this stuff. This is what we're here for. Yeah, we want everyone to vote. I want everyone to vote because that's how we determine the truth of where everyone is. It isn't necessarily just trying to finagle my desired outcome. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's so interesting to me how often the switch will happen. I mean, certainly, obviously, you can see it even in terms of the way they were telling people how to vote in terms of don't do vote by mail last time.
yeah.
And this time they're like, like that whole thing with JD Vance saying like, get that vote in the mail and forgetting that like 4 years ago they were saying like only cheaters vote by mail or whatever. So then you had people booing him and then he's like, oh, or go in person and do it. And he's like correcting himself because it's just so interesting to me how, comparing this obviously election to the last one, and it's just really no comparison just because of the nature of 2020 versus, I mean, I've been seeing a lot in my feed the picture of Bernie wearing that mask and having his mittens and waiting at the inauguration, and I'm just like, I completely keep forgetting that we were like fully in COVID right then, like it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I will criticize, the people on the right for their shallow sense of history, but it is interesting how much, recently, you reposted something on the Instagram account of like young women who weren't even aware of the pussy grabbing video.
The Access Hollywood.
And yeah, the
Yeah.
Access Hollywood video, and I was like, how can they forget? And then I did the math and I was like, that was 8 years ago. I mean, that
Yeah.
means if they're 18 now or 19 and this is the first election they're voting and they were 10 when that happened. So imagine if you're 10, the ideas, all of the news that just has gotten buried over that, of course you're not going to have any kind of consciousness of that, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's not helping him with that demographic.
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
Um,
And
you
and
know,
I will say it pairs so well with I'm going to protect them whether they like it or not.
oh yeah.
It's like the kind of reminder of like, oh, that's right. That's who this guy is, you know?
Yeah. And there's a lot of predictions and hedging and wishful thinking and PTSD stress from 2016 going on as far as what's going to happen tomorrow. But the one thing we do know is that women have been outvoting men like by as much as 12% across the board.
Yeah.
And we can put two and two together as to why that might be,
Yeah.
particularly young women. And because that's one of the few things you can confirm is, basically the gender of who's been voting.
Hmm.
So, um, and because of that, a lot of people are expecting it's not going to go Trump's way. And that's why he was doing a rally today with a bunch of pink signs behind him with women holding them up saying women support Trump. And a lot of them look like they didn't want to be there. They were probably paid or
Huh.
something just because he's the one always accusing people of having paid supporters. So it makes you wonder,
Right.
since he projects everything. But they were really just like, what am I doing here? Like they didn't even know. Some of them looked like they didn't know what they had showed up for. Like they're like, what?
Right.
Yeah. So
Well, maybe they also were listening to what Trump is saying and were just as
yeah,
befuddled as everybody else.
yeah, he's really, really just lost in the fog at this point.
Yeah.
I think after we get through this and we can put things in perspective in hindsight, this campaign, his campaign will probably be the most unraveled a, a presidential campaign has ever been in my lifetime in the closing weeks. Like sometimes it just gets sadder or they lose momentum, but they don't just sort of like implode like
Right.
this where he stops talking to his campaign manager 2 weeks out. you
Yeah.
know, um, he stops making sense. They're talking about, they're getting RFK Jr. to see the craziest fucking things he's going to do, like take fluoride out of the water, and he's going to personally take over women's health. Like every bad thing that you could like come up with, they're topping it. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't even like come up with this stuff as a joke. And
Yeah.
I think they took JD Vance off the trail because he was so offensive to women every time he opens his mouth that they're like, this is killing us every time. And so what
Right.
happens? It just gets worse and worse, till yeah, like you said, like I'm going to protect you whether you like it or not. Like that's just say you're going to rape everybody. Just say that and see like what kind of watch the supporters go, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah. It's tough because, I it's the fact that he's been the face and the black soul of the Republican Party for the last decade has it's this whole idea of thinking about all of the different elections that he's been a part of, either been the candidate or if it's a congressional race or something like that where he's sort of just part of it on a peripheral level. It's interesting to think about how I feel after they're over, and it's funny. I feel like, excuse me, last time this happened, with Biden, I went in feeling more confident. And I think one of the things was it was just a sense of like, no, the world knows better. But this time, like, there is going to be part of me that, like, even if we win, will feel kind of like our country um, is a soccer team that's crashed in the wilderness and resorted to cannibalism, and then we got rescued. But on the other side, we're gonna be like, but we ate people. Now we have to just go on and like the just the fact that it got so close, despite everything,
yeah,
is just one of those things where it's like, I hope the spell is broken. If Kamala wins, and God willing, when she wins, not if she wins, you know, there will be this, I hope the sort of the spell that he has cast, the cult that he has created will crumble in a way I thought it would after Biden, but obviously sometimes you have to flush twice. And I'm hoping that eventually, and God willing, this will really be the last time we have to do this, that there will be this kind of reckoning of like, what what did we become? What did we get so close to? How are there so many people that were okay with this man,
yeah,
And beyond even being okay with this man, also that, because again, it's like it's hard for me to feel like there's this huge amount of people that are against Donald Trump, but as I was voting, and I voted on Saturday, as I was voting, I had this feeling as I was doing it that when I voted for Hillary and when I voted for Biden, both times I was excited to do it. But if I was being completely honest with myself, I was voting against Donald Trump more than I was voting for those candidates. And I say that liking both of those candidates. I don't, I mean, no disrespect to them, but this time I certainly felt more of a sense of I am excited to vote for this candidate
That's a really good
and
point.
not just against Donald Trump, although that is a huge part of it. So what seems crazy to me is that like in past, things, it really was this person is so bad, the choice is so clear, and it kind of ended there. Whereas this time, it's not only this person is so bad and the choice is so clear, but also this other one is really good, and
Yeah,
I'm
she
really
rocks.
excited, for this.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that that difference will resonate with people across America. That's
yeah,
my hope for tomorrow.
yeah. And I think the other one of the other metrics that's been really promising has been the Democratic enthusiasm, according to Gallup, has never been higher since they've been doing this over the last 20 or so years. So more than Obama.
Yeah,
And that's how it's felt to me. It's been a short period of time. And I mean, I was a fan of Kamala from early on, as were
yeah,
you, but I've
mm,
always thought she'd be better than Obama. And so we'll get to see, how that performs tomorrow. But I think a lot of other people were feeling that way as well. So
hmm,
hopefully this is a lesson to the Democratic Party to be more inclusive with its candidates and
yeah.
to keep boosting women because they are demanding to be listened to, and they're also showing up in huge numbers, it looks like, to support the party. So,
Yeah, and can't we normalize the idea? I mean, one thing I'll say for America is that we do normalize things fairly quickly. And sometimes we normalize horrible things fairly quickly, as in Donald Trump. But it is fascinating to me how intensely against uh, gay marriage, for example, we were. Not we, but like the
yeah, the country
country
was,
was.
sure. Yeah. 20
And
years ago, you
how
bet. That was the issue going into the election 20
yeah,
years
it was
ago.
huge. I mean, and speaking of Biden, and like I remember how much of a big deal it was when he was saying like, oh yeah, I think gay marriage should be legal, which then, sort of inadvertently pushed Obama to have to, back up his supposed gaffe or whatever. But like, I mean, do you remember when that happened? I
Oh
remember
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, very
so
clearly.
fascinating to me to look back now and think about how like that was a gaffe, like anyway. Um, and now it just seems like something that seemed insane when I was say 13 years old, the idea of normalizing gay marriage. Now it feels so much more normal, and maybe that's because I live in California and I'm very and I am in my sort of liberal echo chamber. Uh, that it feels like no one's really even talking about it, or no one's really like but I just for me, even how historic it felt to vote for an African American man, you know um, with Obama, and then voting for my first female president with Hillary Clinton. Like, if Kamala wins, like, I hope that we can just then suddenly normalize it in the same way that it doesn't seem crazy that another African American person would run,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
that would be that we would just the more we can create kind of equality in this way, the more I think it doesn't become so crazy. And in some ways, that's not a terrible thing, even for Republicans. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
then they don't have to sort of constantly feel like, oh, great, we don't have the trendy black person to, like on our side or whatever, like once it's normalized, it's everybody's just like, well, who is the best candidate? And so
That's right.
that's, I don't know, maybe that's another thing I think will be, a wonderful thing, hopefully, if Harris wins, is just this
Well,
idea
either
that,
way now, I think you're right, even if God forbid she doesn't.
right.
Yeah, she's absolutely normalized that role, and because she's run such a stellar campaign and she took Trump to the woodshed in their debate, and he was afraid to debate her after that. Yeah, she's already set that standard.
She
So I
has,
think
although I think we're not really going to know for sure until election day, because there's so many people that are saying, and certainly we've talked about this on this podcast a lot, just this idea of like, can a man vote for a woman? I mean, it's in the same way that a lot of people were like, I don't know if even though people will say I'm not racist, but it's like, but will they vote for a black guy? You
Yeah.
know, and sure enough, we proved that plenty of Americans are willing to do that and not just sort of pay lip service to the idea of it. But then I feel like the vibe of Hillary Clinton was there was an element of people being like, yeah, I mean, sexism was played a part in that, I think, in her
Huge.
losing,
Yeah.
so I mean, I don't, I think even though it's not a huge part of the campaign, this idea of it being a woman that's running, I
Yeah.
wonder if, I don't know if we'll necessarily see, I guess what I'm saying is it's going to be interesting on election day and again, God willing, the day after to see America being like, we really were ready this time, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And yeah, and so and that sort of brings me to our opening thought for this episode, which is apt for the what our podcast has been about this whole time and leading up to this election. And sorry, it seems like the word privilege is a really potent thing that we should be um, reflecting on in light of all this. Privilege means special treatment, and some folks, like white men, are unaware of the special treatment that they receive. And many white people will think of privilege as, being served by people wearing white gloves, getting into elite universities where you wear ties and sweaters, places with velvet ropes. That's what privilege is to, I think, a lot of white people that don't understand what white privilege means. But privilege for white people, when we talk about white privilege, it's really just getting the benefit of the doubt from police, from school admissions, from jobs, and it's more so with men. But it's that, and so it's not like it's a huge checking account where they're giving big oversized checks to people just because they're white or they're a man. But if you just get that sort of like, oh, how bad can that person be, from a cop, from uh, a bank giving a loan, someone selling real estate. And you think about someone like Donald Trump, who's been getting the benefit of the doubt all of his life from people in the New York Society, from the labor uh, unions that he was ripping off, from voters, from judges that have, shredded their reputations just to try to, give him a leg up somehow. He's like the embodiment of what privilege is, because he's proven himself so unqualified, so uncouth, and so disloyal that it's one of the only things you can really account for is the fact that people thought he was supposed to be a rich, successful, smart guy, and he knows what he's doing. He must, right? He must be good at something because he's famous, because he did commercials for Pizza Hut and other things before getting into The Apprentice. And so that sort of like, oh, how bad can he be? We're still seeing that. We're still seeing that privilege, even as he's saying terrible things he's going to do. There's a class of Trump voters saying, like, well, he doesn't mean it. He's not really going to round up and deport people and put them into camps and make it bloody just because he keeps saying it over and over again. Like they're desperate to like find a way to make it okay for him. And so that's sort of like how noxious privilege can really be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think what is a privilege is so defined not so much by the people that have the things, but by the people who don't have the things. So,
Mm.
like when you talk about white privilege, it's only a privilege because other people don't have it. I mean, in
Right.
many cases,
Yeah,
this
that's right.
idea of like, you know, a police immediately assuming, oh, the black guy is dangerous, or like that. The idea of getting the benefit of the doubt type of a thing, that's white privilege, but it's only white privilege because the black guy walking down the street and the cop, giving him trouble, it's only because that exists for that person, but it doesn't exist for me. And so, but when you look at it like the we're supposed to be, innocent until proven guilty. We're supposed to have all of these different elements. Like it's not supposed to feel weighted against us. The game is not supposed to feel rigged. It's like it's not a privilege to feel like the world is systemically built to hold you back. You know what I mean? Um, and so it's just interesting to me how uh, the more that people are just saying like we need to. I mean, this country obviously has a vast history of being as wealthy as it is because certainly generationally even like it goes back to the idea of it was built on the back of slaves, and on stolen land. And I know that that obviously feels, very scandalous to even talk about to some people, this idea that like that the country that we live in that's supposedly, the greatest and most wonderful country in the world wouldn't have so much of what it has if it didn't have a foundation that was very bloody and torturous and awful. And so for me, it's just like it isn't a privilege to be able to vote. It's a right. And
Right.
yet at the same time it's not. So therefore it then becomes this idea of us assuming like, oh no, yeah, everybody should, gets the right to vote. But that in of itself is its own kind of privilege. The assumptions that we make that that's it's not a problem for everybody, that these things are these, and we've obviously got a very shallow history of people, not having those rights, or certainly having those rights taken away, or flaunted or whatever. And to me, it's just very interesting as we approach this, we think about not only is she a woman of color, and not only is she a woman, but also even just again, like this idea of a person who has to work so much harder to be even considered in the running for something. I mean, Kamala to me is like the textbook definition of she had to work 10 times as hard, even throughout the last, however many thousands of years it's been in this election cycle. But like Trump can say the craziest shit ever and also say very little about what he's going to say, what he's going to do with his policies. She's everything she has to is dancing on the head of a needle. As
Mm.
Van Jones, has said the whole she has to be flawless and he can be lawless. Like that to me is a perfect example of like he has white male privilege. No one expects anything from him. She has to be absolutely perfect.
Yes, she has to prove herself at every opportunity. And I was thinking when you brought up what it means, voting should be a right, but it is a privilege that we can take for granted. There's been such a an awareness raised over the last week or two about how many women are probably going to be voting differently than their husbands in this election, and that the Harris campaign put out an ad, if not more than one ad, telling women that your husband won't know who you vote for. There are notes that women are putting in the women's restrooms saying your husband won't know your vote. There was a YouGov poll that said 1 out of 8 women have voted differently than their partner without telling him.
Yeah.
And while this might seem promising when we're in that narrow focus of trying to make sure we get enough support for our candidate that we care about and the issues we care about, it really is a sad testament to how many people are living that kind of life still. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, that it resonated so much that you had Jesse Waters on Fox News openly being nervous about how his wife might vote and that he would consider it a form of adultery if
Right.
she didn't vote how he wanted. And we already know that his mom's not going to vote for Trump, that she's going to vote for Kamala. And the fact that he still expects this kind of deference, and seeing these like really patriarchal men who really think they have the right online, and they usually have really like stuffy beards, saying that well, it's a woman's job to serve her husband and he's the provider, so she absolutely owes him her vote, and that's not what the suffragette said. And so that has been like really sobering for me. in the last week or two, and that's probably going to be reflected when I've already been seeing statistics saying that there's a percentage of Republicans that are voting for Harris, and like your friend Christian Espiritus, who had said that at most we can persuade like 2% of Republicans to vote for us when we need to. I saw at first, reports that like it could be like 5% of Republicans. And then I saw
Yeah.
like it could be 10% of Republicans. And then I saw like it could be a lot more than
Yeah.
just the 10% of Republicans voting for Harris. And uh, and
Which
so
is
that
something to remember with the early voting numbers too. Like, you know,
that's a
I
thing.
was I was talking with, my mom, and we were talking about just the early voting numbers, and I said, yeah, but one thing to consider, and maybe this is, just fantasy, but there are going to be Republicans that are voting for Kamala. I mean, we know it, obviously, whether it's, Dick and Dick Cheney and his daughter, but I can't see a lot of Democrats voting for Trump. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So when
no,
we get these numbers
that's
of
a
like,
very
if
low
it's
number.
50-50 Democrat versus Republican in early voting,
Yeah.
it's like, well, I wonder though, how many of those, if it is supposedly so neck and neck in that regard, how many, they don't know who those Republicans voted for. They just know what party they have
But
voted for in the past,
but that's the thing. So the exit voting in swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, um, Harris has been ahead by double digits in the exit polls. And so
Hmm.
if it's Democrats just barely edging out in early voting in certain places, the numbers that the pollsters are getting when people are coming out are so much bigger for
Yeah.
Harris that you're like, well, wait a minute. What does this portend? And then of course there was the poll from Iowa, the Ann Seltzer poll, which is supposed to consider the gold standard of a poll because she doesn't call people. She chases down people until she's reached enough people that fit the demographic averages, so that she's actually sampled personally across the
Yeah.
spectrum, and that's why it takes her so long to assemble, and that's why she's revered for being accurate. So when she said that
Yeah.
Harris was ahead by 3 points, that was sort of an earthquake this late in the campaign.
Yeah.
But more importantly, she was saying that women over 65 in a huge way are breaking for Harris. And even men are like kind of split, somewhat favoring Harris, older men particularly.
Hmm.
And these are the kinds of signifiers that I think have put a lot of people into the expectation that Harris is going to win, and not just win, but win a lot handier
Yeah.
of a victory than the pollsters have been giving her credit for.
Yeah, I'll say this. I'm, as a guy who was born and raised in Iowa, it's killed me just a little bit every single time that Iowa has voted red, because when I was growing up, my memory of Iowa and my sense of what kind of a place it was very much like blue collar, working class, union style Democrats, ones that voted, that may have been conservative, but understood that like we don't vote for the, Yale graduate elitist people like George H.W. Bush, like that to me was my memory of the kind of vibe that Iowa gave off when they were voting. And I think one of the things that has been so frustrating in feeling like Donald Trump managed to somehow convince all these people that he's working class and he's a fighter for the working class, so fraudulently, might I add, is just sort of like seeing all these people get swayed that way. So it's always been like, no, I don't understand. It's not even a swing state anymore. It's like, oh, it's just they've given up on it. So to read that for me was an extra like, yes, please give me some pride back in my
Mm.
hometown. But to me, it also is interesting how I'm so fascinated by the fact that I mean, as we get older, generally, we, have a much longer sort of understanding of history. Every day that goes on. But so 10 years to me now feels very small.
Yeah.
Like, compared to say when I was 20, now that I'm in my 40s. And, I have to believe that even though 10 years ago, certainly 10 years of Donald Trump has felt very endless and just like, but I do remember a different Republican Party. I do remember what kind of people they were, or at least what they, claimed to be in, when it was Mitt Romney, when it was John McCain, all of those types of people, even when it was, George W. Bush. And it's just so interesting to think that there are so many people that have no concept of the way that used to be. Donald Trump is the only representation of the Republican Party since 2015 in a way to
Yeah,
them.
yeah, and
And
he's chased
so,
away all the old standard bearers.
right. And so there's this idea that like what we were left with is Donald Trump and very cynical opportunists like Mitch McConnell, and you either got kicked off or pushed away like John McCain. You seemingly went to the other side like Mitt Romney in terms of like being an active sort of enemy of Donald Trump, or you became Lindsey Graham, just sort of like a toady. And to me, I'm just like when I hear these numbers of the way that older people's, obviously older women, but older people in general, I think to myself, they must remember that it didn't used to be like this. It didn't, the candidates didn't used to behave this way in the case of Donald Trump. And so it does seem to me that like why isn't there just so many of these older people that are like, this isn't right. This isn't the way that it used to be. I'm not going to vote for this candidate just because he's my team, Like I can understand young men that are, angry and feel underappreciated or served, and they look to the example of Donald Trump, which is probably the only real example that they have had of a male political leader within the time of being conscious of politics, many of them.
Yeah,
But
yeah, you're right.
older people don't, they can remember like, geez, remember when we had shame?
Yeah. So, here's in Kamala's campaign this week. We'll take a look at her closing argument, I guess, at the Ellipse, which is the same site where Donald Trump launched his coup attempt on the Capitol on January 6th. This had a crowd of 75,000 people in attendance, if not more, making it one of the biggest political rallies ever, and certainly bigger than Trump's, which he very much complained about. So we'll take a look at her.
Nearly 250 years ago, America was born when we wrested freedom from a petty tyrant. Across the generations, Americans have preserved that freedom, expanded it, and in so doing, proved to the world that a government of, by, and for the people is strong and can endure. And those who came before us, the patriots at Normandy and Selma, Seneca Falls and Stonewall, on farmlands and factory floors, they did not struggle, sacrifice, and lay down their lives only to see us cede our fundamental freedoms. They didn't do that only to see us submit to the will of another petty tyrant. These United States of America, we are not a vessel for the schemes of wannabe dictators. The United States of America is the greatest idea humanity ever devised. A nation big enough to encompass all our dreams, strong enough to withstand any fracture or fissure between us, and fearless enough to imagine a future of possibilities. So, America, let us reach for that future. Let us fight for this beautiful country we love. And in 7 days, we have the power, each of you has the power to turn the page and start writing the next chapter in the most extraordinary story ever told. I thank you all. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Damn, that felt like history to me.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine going back to that? I mean, like having that kind of a voice and that kind of a presence leading us. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm so excited. You know, it's in some ways, I think one of the reasons that so many of us are so anxious is not just because of the threat Donald Trump represents, but also like, and I don't mean to drag on Hillary, but just the feeling of that woman speaking when, again, when, not if, she is elected, to me is going to be so profound. And so the idea that we wouldn't get that, the idea that we would be denied that in order to have another 4 years of that maniac is so much more tragic to me. You know,
yeah,
not, and again, it feels wrong to sort of say like, you know, to praise Kamala by talking about how superior she is to Hillary Clinton, but I just, you know, I remember what the guest that we had on, you know, a couple of weeks ago when she was saying the difference between her and Hillary is that, like, I don't know how many women were sobbing with, you know, pride and inspiration at a speech of Hillary Clinton's, you know?
right, right. Yeah,
And you know, for me, that's where I find my hope going into tomorrow, you know, is
yeah.
just she's, you know, I feel different in a way this time than I did last time. And even though, I mean, I'm scared, I'm nervous, you know, and you know, there's a comedian and a one that we posted his, you know, his commentary about what, you know, a real man won't vote for Trump, but he was talking about that, you know, right now it feels like the series finale of America, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, it is interesting kind of, it's an interesting kind of idea, but you know, I don't know. I'm hopeful. How are you feeling right now about this? Like what level of anxiety of you know, dread? Like I feel like we're all kind of just like pushing it into the closet and kind of just trying to close the door, and it's all there. But I guess how much effort is it for you to push that door closed?
You know, I've just been looking at all the signs around me, and it's very easy to find yourself online in a bubble where people are saying things that they want to hear, and other people are liking it, and they get mad at articles that tell them things they don't want to hear. And I see how that's no different from the left or the right. But when you see how empty Trump's rallies have been the last couple days, how sad he looks, how bewildered, you know, um, and you see how packed and overflowing every Kamala Harris speech is, how the crowds are in overflow. You know, again, this is, you know, a microscopic kind of uh, detail in the context of the whole country. I read a report in Slate from someone who's from North Carolina, and he says if you drive around North Carolina, like you see Harris billboards everywhere. Like, and if you're on the radio, you hear a Harris ad. Like, it feels like there's no campaign for Trump going on in North Carolina.
Wow.
Like normally, like there would be, even if it's a different approach of ground game, of like local people building it out versus a national ground game, you're at least aware of it. And he's like, it's nowhere to be seen. Like that doesn't mean that people aren't going to vote. It doesn't mean that like the mailers that the Trump campaign are sending out aren't making inroads. But you know, for somebody from North Carolina who has that perspective, you know, and these are the things that objectively we knew were going to happen, you know, that the RNC became a subsidiary of Trump himself and was funneling money to pay off his legal settlements and his lawyers. And they were going to outsource their ground game to people who'd never done it before, like Charlie Kirk. And he didn't do a good job. And he's from Arizona. And so Elon Musk has taken it over. And I read an article that described him as like one of the biggest rubes to walk into like the political gallery and get fleeced by political consultants for all of his money, um, telling him things that he's going to want to hear and not doing anything, you know.
Yeah.
And it was reported how his pack who had hired people to canvass in Michigan, some of them didn't know they were there for Trump. They were being driven around in the back of a U-Haul. I mean, for a guy who has a car company, couldn't even like get them a cyber truck to look cool doing. And they were threatened if they didn't meet their goals that they would have to pay for their own hotel bills. I mean, this kind of like cheapness in the final stakes, in the final, in the final stages are so it's so sort of shocking to me that so much has been entrusted to so much cluelessness. And yet at the
Yeah.
same time, that's what we see. I read a really interesting thread from a guy who's posts under anonymous audio tech. And he was like, if you're wondering why there are so many audio problems at Trump's rallies, which sets him off and he complains, and then he famously pantomime fellatio just the other day on a microphone. And I know the press doesn't know how to report on that. I mean, and that's obviously not winning independent voters and it's pissing off some of the fundamentalists. But he was saying, look, it's not that like audio techs are going to try to undermine him. If anything, union crews are going to work extra hard to prove that they're not overpaid flacks when it's an anti-union person showing up. They're going to show that they're good at their job and they're worth their money. And so what that means is really a couple things. One, that there's really no advance team doing this prep, and there's no one that knows how to do this, because when a mic goes out, there's another microphone on the lectern to turn on, and that there has never been something like that, and they're not doing these kinds of advanced things. And sometimes they're doing audio tests like when the doors are open and people are coming in still. So it's the lack of professionalism, the lack of foresight, the lack of planning, and the lack of good of hiring experienced people, and the lack of those people that want to work on your campaign. And they're not even bothering to learn from it, even as it keeps happening at an event after an event after an event. And so these are the kinds of signs of just like, wow, I don't think this campaign is being run really well. And it's not just the fact that, he's going off on hate sprees and, trying to hold a Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden a week before the election. And I think it's amazing that a comedian bombing at that is probably going to have safely sealed his fate, because he mobilized a contingent which is, notoriously fickle. They don't always vote one way and they don't always vote. And now they're all voting one way. And so, just mobilizing the Puerto Rican and the Latino vote against him in the last week or so has been really remarkable. And I want to show you this clip. And I think I shared it with you before, but in Don't Be That Guy, a couple of clips of Nick Fuentes. Um, don't be that guy that gets it years later after it should have been obvious. And while it is good to finally have the spell broken of being a Trump supporter, and it is amazing to behold it yourself, this is a guy who is openly uh, misogynistic, racist, anti-Semitic. In fact, it's like a joke to watch some of his other videos that he's doing now. It would be like a sketch, because he's saying things like, it used to be about, being mean to women, being racist, being anti-Semitic, and now it's just about the racism. It's like they lost what the whole thing was about. Like, he's actually saying this in his other videos. So he does count as like a neo-Nazi, and he does like align himself with the incel movement. I think it might be true that he is a virgin. He is very young, but you can see why he'd have a problem relating to others. But in just watching this clip, it's very enlightening to see his epiphany. So we'll watch this and then the next clip of him.
Garbage. And at the Trump rallies, they're yelling, trash for Trump, trash for Trump. And I saw other people. I saw white guys. I saw Hispanic guys inside trash cans jumping out of them with Trump signs. White guys with garbage bags that say trash for Trump 2024. And that was kind of like, to me, that was the moment when I realized Trumpism was a cult. That was the moment when I realized liberals are right. That was the moment when I realized it has gone too far. It is Frankenstein's monster. We have created a golem. It is a problem. You know, for years, liberals said, it's a cult. You're in a cult. And I said, you're going to jail. You're going to jail. It is a cult, and we are in it, and you are going to jail. That's how I felt about it for the past 8 years. But then I saw themselves dressing up as trash, like uncritically just dressing up as garbage and saying, we're garbage. Yeah, we're garbage. And I said, yeah, I think we have a problem. It's like that moment in Scientology when they tell you about Xenu.
Dude, that Xenu line just took me out. That took me out. So this is another segment. Hold on.
A way to defend it. Trump goes up and gives these ridiculous rallies, rambling for hours, talking about Hannibal Lecter or other stuff, then defends it, says he's weaving. And people go, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, no, it isn't. These are not like the Trump rallies from the beginning. And so you have these supporters who are they have an endless tolerance for being humiliated, for being insulted, for being betrayed. Trump goes against the fundamental principles of the first campaign, sells out to billionaires, and then they'll humiliate themselves with the trash bags. At the same time, you have the nervous system of the Trump campaign.
So, and not to be outdone, here is a clip of the guy who coined the term alt-right, another actual Nazi, Richard Spencer, who put out a video saying why I'm voting for Kamala Harris.
It is voting for the person who best offers stability, safety, continuation, and is most likely to be the best manager of the American empire. And when I put it that way, the choice is very clear. I think Donald Trump and the MAGA movement bring nothing but stupidity and chaos. Am I a liberal or a centrist in my heart of hearts? No. But again, I don't think voting is really an expression of your heart of hearts, what you truly believe in and desire. I think it is a calculation. It's a sort of ratio of the least bad.
It's, it's like that Onion article, like the worst person in the world just made a good point. Yeah, both of those just blew my mind. And Richard Spencer, his video is like 12 minutes long, and he's like, this is not a troll. I'm not doing this. He genuinely thinks of Harris as a center-right politician, which it's maybe in perspective compared to like the fascist right that has risen. But, Trump put on a Nazi rally a week ago and he lost Nazis. He lost the Nazi vote, dude. Like,
Yeah.
who's left? Like, so when you ask me, like, how am I thinking? I'm like, dude, if those guys are calling bullshit, if those guys who were all in, like, this guy organized a Charlottesville rally, for fuck's sakes, okay? Dude, like, holy crap, it's not just Cheney's doing this. It's not just the son of John McCain. It's not just the son of the daughter of George Bush or the daughter of Rudy Giuliani. Like, this is some craziness.
And it's funny, a lot of like that ridiculous comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, he was like, God wants Donald Trump to win, and that's why he wasn't assassinated. And I'm like, okay, but then there's just this tidal wave of self-owns that, I was reading about, he's having a rally right now in Pittsburgh where the Steelers are, and brings Jim Brown's daughter up, and she's Cleveland Brown. I don't really know much about football, but I know Jim Brown and his daughter. Famous football player Jim Brown. His daughter comes up wearing a Cleveland Browns jersey. I don't know if that's going to appeal to a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans, to have
Yeah.
her come up with wearing a Browns jersey. I mean, it's that kind of thing where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like nothing is going right, in the sense that it felt like a perfect storm got him elected the first time.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why I kind of felt more confident with Biden that like, well, it just can't happen again. But this time I feel like it doesn't even feel like when we get attacked by people online and people are writing their things, you just think to yourself like, why is there so much of this vileness in the world? Why are they like these people are taking so much time out of their day to attack someone, a moderate to low trafficked, podcast.
Yeah,
And
dude.
that's what they spend their day doing. And so it's just to me, it makes me think like, I guess right now I feel much more kind of surrounded by people that I can't relate to in any way, shape, or form. I just feel like they're more, and maybe it is like people are saying, they're more empowered by Trump. They feel like, yes, we know there is no consequence if I, really let it all hang out with all of my, and my freak flag can fly. And at this point, since, no one has basically, it to me, it's just like, I just feel much more the presence of them, and they've all come out of the woodwork. And it's crazy to think of those people like that sort of receding back. And some of it, I think, is strategic. Maybe they're saying like, we can't align ourselves with this fool any longer, because basically the question becomes, when you look at who is left on the Republican side, it's basically like there's the cult at the very bottom, and next on the pyramid is the people that are kind of like footmen that are sort of like they serve at the pleasure of what they view as kind of the powerful. And then there's the ambitious people that are not true believers, but think they can use Trump. They can worm their way through the system. And then there's the people that are nihilists and just nothing matters to them. There's nothing that is sacred to them, and they're just like, who cares? Nothing, enrich myself. Other than that, it doesn't matter, And then at the very top, you've got Donald Trump, who's kind of like a mad king, who's very much like at this point just completely self-obsessed and completely absorbed with retribution and any gross thing that pops into his head. He's just like, say it, doesn't matter, who cares, nothing, But also, I think beyond the nihilist, for him, it's all just like this intense greed and avarice, an obsession with himself and his own fame and fortunes. So to me, the question becomes sort of, who do we fear? And to me, I feel like there's Donald Trump at the top. There's J.D. Vance, who I would put in the category of someone who's more ambitious. And I think that as soon as Donald Trump loses, he's going to figure out a way to try and slither out, and align himself with the next, sort of person he thinks can help him attain power and wealth. And then there's the people like Stephen Miller who are, I think, kind of evil to the core, you know what I mean? And like, and have like, I mean, even Steve Bannon to me doesn't feel quite like a true believer. He feels like he's maybe part nihilist and part cynical opportunist,
Yeah.
But to me, when we look at like, I was talking with my sister about like who scares us the most. And to me, it's like, I'm not really that scared of J.D. Vance in the same way that I'm scared of Stephen Miller,
Exactly. Yeah. Stephen Miller is like he has plans for the camps on him
Right.
at any given time,
Yeah.
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 He's got the blueprints. He's been fantasizing about this shit.
Right. And it's interesting to see, I thought that we were getting that the moment when all the rats abandoned ship. I thought we were getting that on January 6th when you had all of the Republicans say, this is awful. This is, like even Lindsey Graham saying like, I'm out of this,
Yeah.
and Mitch McConnell, all these people, saying it's a terrible thing. And then to see them sort of see that the tides did not turn far enough away from Donald Trump. and to watch them slowly go back and be like, well, it wasn't that big of a deal, kind of thing,
Yeah.
and try to rewrite that history. I don't know if we'll get. I don't know. To me, I kind of am interested in the projection of like, what is going to happen to those people this time if Donald Trump loses? Are they? I mean, and to me, it's very encouraging, like you're saying, to see that even people like Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer being like, I got to get out of this now. He's making us Nazis look bad. I mean, so it's going to be interesting to see how that manifests. I think. I mean, the future. I really don't want to spend much time thinking about what the future is like if Donald Trump is elected tomorrow or the next, the following week or whatever. Um, but it is fascinating to me to think like, is he going to go to jail? Is
Oh,
that
yeah.
if he loses, are we going to see Donald Trump go to jail? And what is that going to be like? If his cultish supporters are insane to try and get him, to maintain the presidency on January 6th, what are they going to do if a jury and a judge say, no, you're going to jail, what is that going to look like? Are they, because at some point, even the MAGA true believers have to jump ship. You know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
they have to say, we got to find it's like, even if you're a rabid sports fan, if your quarterback loses and loses and loses and loses, there does come a moment where even the most loyal sports fan will be like, get him out of here. We need a new quarterback.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I think that will happen. And I think he is looking at jail time, and I think he is looking at more trials that he does not have a winning hand in, and he's not going to get support from others for. Then he doesn't have the money to pay for real defense teams. And so I think that's what's going to happen is a long, slow, miserable decline for him. And
Maybe not even that slow. You never know. I mean, he doesn't have that much time left, I would say, in terms of just
well, yeah,
father
I think it's
time,
just going to be
you
so
know?
drawn out,
Right. Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
more trials and more things. And so, yeah. And when you talk about how the tide could have turned if Mitch McConnell had just gone ahead with the impeachment after January 6th and nobody would have blamed him, then Trump wouldn't have been eligible to run again. But he
Hmm.
chickened out. And now he's got to live with that legacy that he left the party that he broke every conceivable norm and rewrote every law for and stonewalled the unimaginable to try to preserve. And now it's gone to this maniac who's probably going to lose anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what Mitch McConnell has to show for all the crap that he pulled and for his lack of conviction. And
Yeah.
so, I saw really, there's a Republican strategist who's just been like taking him to task. Um, and I'll look for his name. He's been posting a lot over the last couple days, but he said something really potent when he was talking about Stuart Stevens. He says, Republicans, what you forgot about Faustian bargains with Mephistopheles is that not only does he take your soul, he doesn't deliver. Donald Trump won one race with 46.1%, and you folded on every value you claimed to believe. You deserve this.
Mm.
And he worked with the Bush campaigns, Romney, McCain. Like these are the kinds of guys who just watched it all go down the drain and has nothing but horror for the people that he considered contemporaries. So, um, so there is a lot of backlash, and I've said it before, that like I didn't see anyone in my life so openly supporting the candidate from the other party. Like that just doesn't happen. Maybe they're quiet about it. Maybe they don't come out and vote. But there's just more and more people who are Republicans saying like, I'm done with this. It's enough. And it's all anecdotal, but there's so many anecdotes from so many people about their neighbor, their family member, their dad who never voted before and is now voting for Harris, or other people that it's like, okay, I think this is a real thing. I think this is a real like cultural change. And I think the reality is that after a certain period of time, it has been like 9 years since he descended down that escalator to announce his presidential run. Um, you know, we've lived long enough. There are fads that'll last like a decade or something. And so Obama brought us hope, but he also angered a lot of white people who felt alienated, and they were ripe suckers for Trump to feel special again. And the only political credential Trump had when he ran was that he got the black guy to show him his birth certificate. He played some sort of race card to say, like, oh, I don't think you're qualified enough. I'm going to come up with some sort of sense of authority to make you prove yourself to me, no matter how high you've achieved in our society. That was all it took for them. And after that, it was just put downs, put downs. Mexicans are rapists. We're going to build a wall, la da 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 da, misogyny, and they were all fine with it. And so now that we've been living with all talk and hatred and nothing to show for it, I think that that era has come to an end, and it's inevitable. And that's something you learn, is that you can't keep things a certain way, and as it is, this has outlasted the Confederacy. There are other things that had happened that were real marks of American history that didn't last nearly as long as this MAGA crap. And that's why I think it's set to expire, like possibly like this week. So and that's why you see these kind of tantrums. So we'll take a look at men making men look bad. This is another video from the past couple days of from South Carolina, a man showing up for early voting, and he was told by the black women working at the polling place that he had to remove his Trump hat, and he took great umbrage at this. And his wife just sort of stood there while he threw a fit. And I'm gonna sort of explain it, because we're gonna, for people who are listening. So he takes it out on the people. He swears openly, and he then starts poking and shoving, and the other poll workers have to get between him and another woman. And mind you, this is a white guy with all black women.
Oh, wow.
This is my motherfucking right.
Wow.
Why is it defending you? All right, then shut the hell up and let me vote.
This other woman steps in. Okay, I'll take over.
Wow.
Guy throws his hat.
Wow.
Everyone's trying to explain it to him.
Wow.
And then he pokes her in the head, and then she swings at him. And then the other women gather around and try to get between her and that angry white guy.
Wow. 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 Wow.
The woman is removed to another room so she doesn't confront him.
Wow. 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 I might want to work with him. I may want to work with him.
Yeah. That's a man making men look bad with his angry voting tantrum. And it's not a new rule that you can't wear political attire into the voting booth. And in fact, in Ohio, the Secretary of State just put out a ruling saying that you can wear MAGA hats and shirts when you show up to vote, which might seem skewed and wrong. At the same time, it might be preventing more confrontations like that from poll workers trying to do their jobs with people who are clearly looking for a fight when they wear them to the polling place. So it's that kind of that's a helpless response if you're a man who can't control your temper, can't control your language, can't not poke an older woman in the face because you want to make her feel bad and make her feel as angry as you are. that looks to me like a last gasp of white supremacy. That looks desperate to me. That
Yeah.
looks like a guy who knows things aren't going his way, and he was already not looking forward to this, but now he really has to take it out on the black women who are there giving him rules, and he can't
Yeah.
take hearing the rules from
Well,
black
yeah,
women.
and you see you think about the suffragettes, you think about the civil rights movement, you think about
Yeah.
people in Selma that were marching across the bridge and and being attacked by police and with dogs and horrible experiences and these terrible things, and the amount of work and effort that is put into for them to have the right, not the privilege, to vote. And then you compare that to this guy who he's so used to everything being, by and for him that
Privilege, if you will.
the small inconvenience of could you take your hat off? We're actually not allowed to have any political things in the actual, polling place, and he just loses it. He it's like, to me, it's like, bro, have some concept of the fact that you are not struggling to put your vote in right now. They're not trying to silence your voice.
Oh, yeah.
It's a rule. You may find that rule to be arbitrary. You might find it to be petty or whatever it is, but it's just like, think about that and compare it to what so many people had to do in order to place their vote in a way that you have no concept of. And then try to bring that level of rage. It's like, it's no different than the toddler in in Toys R Us screaming like, I want the $150 play set, I deserve it, because they have no concept of the fact that, like, how many people don't get $150 play sets. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah, and
yeah.
especially because he knows very likely that you're not supposed to wear political garb. This probably isn't his first election. This probably is something that he was counting on being told, and he was banking on being able to cause a scene over it. And so that level of immaturity, of selfishness, of just infantile behavior, that makes men look bad, because it shows that men only know how to respond with anger. They only and they can only see things as getting their way, and
Yeah.
that if you're asking them to go do anything that wasn't in their plan, they're going to lose their crap. That they're the
And
overly emotional ones.
sometimes the plan is to lose their crap, as you say, like that it was not, I often think about January 6th, and I think about the fact that I wonder if it would have happened had we not had a summer of Black Lives Matter protests, in that so often you see the right say they're kind of like, they have like, they have protest envy, they have like
Yeah, they
victim
do.
envy.
Yes.
They're tired of hearing how hard it is for people that and they get jealous of. I mean, that's to me why you even have Donald Trump saying, oh, all of a sudden she's black, because there's part of him that's kind of like jealous of the fact that she can utilize some element of her race to court a demographic. That's how he sees it. This
Yes, you're
idea
right.
that it's like, it's a boon because, she gets to play the race card.
Yeah, the
And it's
victim envy,
like,
because he's always complaining about poor me.
yeah,
Everything's so unfair to me.
of
Oh shit, a
course.
black woman. Crap.
Right.
Even I know that they got it worse. Yeah.
Right. And so then you see that same kind of victim envy with even like January 6th. And what's hilarious, I mean, it's horrible, but it's hilarious just in how, like, you see that victim envy play out in January 6th, and how it's like this is clearly their very first, their very first protest march, because they don't do it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
you're right.
they're immediately like, oh, well, I've heard of people like lighting fires and like turning cars. Let's storm the Capitol. And it's
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
You feel like that if they had been, if they had actually experienced a protest that had been tear gassed, a protest that had been broken up by, the National Guard or whatever, compared to what they experienced on January 6th, and the relative, like, which is one of the reasons why so many of the security people were like, we didn't expect it to get this crazy, because it's like there was,
Yeah, everyone else knows better. You're right. Yeah.
Right. And so I think that like it's interesting to see this guy being another example of like if he did go with the knowledge, the prior knowledge of like I can't wear this hat, but I'm going to do it because I want to show that they're trying to that they're the fascists. They won't let me wear my hat, you know? And
Right.
once again, it's this absurdity of like you have no idea what it actually means to feel a systemic system that's based and pushing against you. They think that it's like, I can't wear my hat. Oh, you can't say Merry Christmas anymore.
Yeah.
Like that to them is the oppression that they are fighting against. And it's absurd in, when you compare it to real oppression, just like how absurd January 6th was when you compare it to the protests that had been going on that summer for George Floyd. So, it's always so cringy when you see these people desperately trying to grab on to some grievance that they have absolutely no right to,
Yeah, you're right.
and it just manifests in this white privilege way. And that's why you get, the whole Karen meme. It's always like, a woman who has no real understanding of what it means to be oppressed, screaming out and saying like, oppression,
Yeah, yeah. And when you look at the footage of January 6th and you look at the camera turning around at the crowd storming the Capitol, like it's all white men. It's like somebody did white men wrong, rounded up a bunch of white men from across the country, and they're all there attacking cops like they have a right to, And when you talk about victim envy, I mean, there really is just like uh Nick Fuentes was talking about just in the past week. I mean, there were so many Trump supporters wearing garbage bags on Halloween for their costume. Donald Trump Jr. wore a garbage bag with actual garbage taped to it, thinking like this was an own of everyone else. Um, Megyn Kelly put on a garbage bag and, of course, put a belt around it so she still looked in, but with a red hat. And a journalist posted, I wish I enjoyed anything as much as Republicans enjoy being the victim. And that's really what it is. And there was, the good liars who have gone to way too many Trump rallies, and their videos are enlightening because, yeah, it's funny to catch people not knowing what they're talking about or finding a hypocrisy or something. But after a while, it just gets sad. Like you realize these people don't know what they're doing there. They went along with the flow. And when he's asking this couple why they're wearing garbage bags, they're all proud about it and they're wearing matching garbage bags. And someone made them for them, I think, and because there's something printed on the back and it said Biden called us garbage, which he did not. It was completely misconstrued, purposely. But we're Americans. And so the guy from The Good Liars is asking them, like, well, but if you're Americans and you're not garbage, wouldn't you be wearing like just an American flag or something? Like, you're like, no, but this is what it says. And he's like, but you're saying you're not garbage. So don't you see how it's a little of a disconnect if you're dressing as garbage while saying that you're not garbage? And then the one woman after a moment's like, I'm confused. Like it's just dawning on her. And like this is the level of like, yeah, it's cult, yeah, it's conforming, yeah, it's like desperate to be feel a victim of somehow, but it's just really a lack of thinking that's going on, at the
Yeah.
bottom of it,
And
it's
you
like,
hope
oh, I just heard a
that
lot of shouting and I just wanted to join in. I didn't really
yeah,
think
I
about it.
mean, clearly there's examples throughout history of people being swept up,
Yeah.
by madness, whether it's, a Hitler rally in the 40s, or, it's, I mean, even when it's not something negative, like, young girls getting swept up by the Backstreet Boys or what, I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
when people get pulled into a kind of hysteria, logic changes and it seems different, and it's going to be really interesting, I think, to watch that spell get broken. In a previous episode, I made the comparison of O.J. Simpson and
Yeah.
a group of people that wanted, they just wanted a voice. They just wanted
Yeah.
someone who could fight fire with fire finally,
Yeah. They wanted to
and
get back at the LAPD.
exactly. And so, but only to later realize once they got what they wanted with the, innocent verdict that I think as time went on, they sort of were like, the spell was broken and they're like, the guy did it. He did it.
Yeah.
What I wanted was not, he was not a good advocate for what I wanted, what the justice I wanted. And
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that there will be a moment for these people. And just like it seems like there was with Nick Fuentes and Richard Spencer and, Geraldo, that even if it came incredibly late, even if these
Yeah.
people should have known better from long ago, that there will become that moment where they're like, oh no, Donald Trump was a terrible voice. He was a terrible person.
Yeah.
I mistook his wealth as being something that was a weapon that suddenly made us, be able to attack the other side and use the system against it. Like he can root out all the corruption because he's not bought by the billionaires, only to be like, oh no, yeah, he probably murdered those two people. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that to me is what I'm hoping will happen, and it's going to be fascinating to see that. And whether it happens again, God willing, Kamala wins, and that in that process of changing the hearts and minds of those who were true believers begins on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever, or God forbid it happens at some point in on the journey of another Trump administration. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I'm just that to me is the only thing that I think I look forward to seeing, because it will happen no matter what.
Yes, you're right.
Good or bad tomorrow, that will eventually happen.
And that's why he's playing to half full rally spaces that are already much smaller than the arenas he used to fill. I mean, he's already playing, giving his rallies at airport hangars because he's stiffed entire municipalities across the country. And then even then, when it's a smaller space, half of it has been empty. And that's not a sign of the kind of movement where people are like, all in like they used to be. So, but to give you a sign as to how the legal system is proceeding, in our white guy of the week, Philadelphia D.A. Larry Krasner gave a presentation today, press conference, talking about election day security in the swing state.
We don't have any deep abiding fears or concerns. We don't have any reports. I want people to be reassured that when they get up tomorrow to go vote, if they have not voted already, that everybody in this city is working and has been working for months to make sure that there will be nothing tough about that experience and nothing to fear in that experience. But I also want to be clear, anybody who thinks it's time to play militia, F around and find out. Anybody who thinks it's time to insult, to deride, to mistreat, to threaten people, F around and find out. We do have the cuffs, we do have the jail cells, we do have the Philly juries, and we have the state prisons. So if you're going to try to turn an election into some form of coercion, if you're going to try to bully people, bully votes or voters, you're going to try to erase votes, you're going to try any of that nonsense, we're not playing. F around and find out.
Dude, he cannot stop saying that. He means it. I believe him. I believe him. And it's that kind of legal, laying down the law that we've been missing from our attorney general. And that's why the judge that sentenced Tina Peters to 9 years in her election interference case in Colorado seemed like such a burst of fresh air. It's because of reminding people that the law matters. There are consequences. It doesn't matter if you're rich, doesn't matter if you're an angry white guy. There are absolutely going to be consequences. The law is the same for everyone. And for all those January 6th rioters, a lot of them have been and going to jail. You know, one of them was sentenced just a week ago to a year, and he was one I knew out here, Jay Johnson.
Wow. Wow.
And,
Yeah.
you know, to watch him decline into, you know, he had a drinking problem that was well known. And at some point, I believe he was in an accident. He used to drive this Jeep that was like, you know, it was missing like a windshield or something, and he would drive around in this thing without seatbelts. And I believe he was in an accident, injured his head, went even further down the spiral of alcohol and drugs. And then you saw him on January 6th actually leading the charge in the tunnel against the Capitol Police. He was attacking some of them with the shield, and that's why he got, you know, the extra time than others did. And that guy was so dumb, he went as the QAnon shaman to a Halloween party the year before. Like, he was so like, oh, this is never gonna, I'll never have a consequence for this. And that was the first page of the sentencing memo from the federal attorneys. It was like, this guy's not sorry. This guy'll do it again. Here he is laughing it up, dressed in, you know, horns and makeup, face paint, you know? And so, like, yeah, there's fucking consequences, dude. I'm sorry. Like, all of these people, you know, there was another clip of Nick Fuentes that, you know, I could keep showing some of the stuff he says. It's just amazing. He was like, I thought it was going to be good what Trump does, but everything he touches dies. You know, and I was like, wow, it's like we've all been saying, he's even using the same phrases we've been using. So yeah, watching the consequences come around everyone else, you know, Rudy Giuliani lost his townhouse and his baseball memorabilia,
His watches.
You know, he's going to be one of those homeless people that he was so relentless to and ruthless to when he was mayor at this point. So,
wow.
So
that feels Dickensian, you know.
It sure
feels,
does. So
yeah.
I want to show this other video that was just released today by the Harris campaign. It's narrated by Viola Davis, and it's centered around Kamala's mother, Shamala, and it really is a powerful closing message for the women that are actively both taking the streets in the Women's March this weekend, and also reminding us of exactly what an abortion ban means. It doesn't mean that you just can't have babies, you know, that you can't back out of having babies that you didn't want. It means that women can't get health care over basic things when a pregnancy goes wrong, and then they die, and they die painful deaths. And this is what just happened to an 18-year-old in Texas. And so this is a very sort of powerful piece that they just released today.
Trying to rain on the thunder, tell a storm I'm new.
Something cracks open inside you when you become a mother. You realize long after you're gone, these children will be your legacy. This mother came to America at 19 years old. She stood 5 feet tall, but she stood tall. Becoming a cancer researcher, birthing 2 daughters, Kamala and Maya, and with them, she birthed her legacy. She taught them to believe in themselves and to stand up for others. It's what made Kamala become a prosecutor who fought for justice, an attorney general who took on corporations to protect working people, the senator and vice president who stood up for women's rights. And now, in this moment, Kamala Harris has a new way forward. She says every worker should be able to provide with dignity. That's your right. Every generation should do better than the last. That's your legacy. Every American should be able to buy a home, start a business, and save enough to invest. It's time for a new generation of leadership, one of optimism and belief in a better future for all Americans. This daughter of Shamala, this daughter of the American story, is ready to lead us forward.
Damn. Their
Amen.
videos have been top notch, every single one. I just
Yeah.
got to give it up to the Harris campaign. They've really delivered, and
Yeah.
especially when you realize that it was pretty much on short notice. They didn't have a year or two to plan all this. This came together kind of overnight, and it's they haven't missed, and that's something you never see in a presidential campaign. So I am very inspired by the campaign, certainly by that closing message, and I'm been inspired by the conversations we've been able to have on this podcast with all of our guests, and how so many people that we've spoken to can identify exactly what we're talking about when it talks about why men have a hard time admitting that they're wrong, or what self-pity leads to, or what humility means, or dignity, and what are the issues that men have that are crushing them, that they're trying to live up to. And so I'm glad that we've been able to make this happen in the short time that we did, and this is episode 18, which is kind of nuts. So that we did this many episodes in 3 months or so. And I appreciate everyone who's listened, and everyone who's commented and liked, shared our videos, encouraged us, hopefully donated. And thank you. I think you've been a great voice for this place and this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's been an honor, and it's been, for me, I think it really is that question that we asked so many episodes ago of like, well, what can we do? I mean, even when you approached me and said, should we try and make this podcast? I was, very open-minded and was like, yeah, let's do it, and to have a place to discuss, to feel like there's some kind of conversation that can be had and hopefully shared with, people like you and me, and hopefully, change some minds, or if nothing else, to encourage and make them feel like the people that agree with us are, not alone. They're not, as as we start to feel more and more isolated, I know I have at times felt like just the voices of meanness, honestly, that come from the other side to me, just close in so often, especially online. It's been really nice to feel like we're offering an alternative, something that is, I think a positive, voice to offer encouragement and perhaps a perspective that a person hasn't had prior, But so thank you for involving me in this, and yeah, and thank you so much to everybody who's listened. I can only hope that right now we're acting as a kind of time capsule that one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe, a month from now, we can look back on and say they didn't know, but there was something really great that was just ahead,
Yeah,
So I'm excited for that.
and I'll say this, today, Shepard Fairey posted on his social media accounts a series of photos of people with his poster that he made for Kamala, and it started with Spike Lee, and there were photos from different cities and different ones and it really looked beautiful, like there was a movement. And to my surprise, we were the last slide in that slideshow, and it made me excited to be included. But to look at it, it felt like you really have to step out of yourself in a way that you don't get to, especially when you're working so much on this. But it was a way to like look at us and be like, wow, we were part of a movement. This feels historic now to see it in this context.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would have hoped for, is that I felt like I rose to this occasion, especially under short notice, and that I helped spread the enthusiasm. I helped, that we were able to get the excitement going early on, right when it started, to tell other people that this was going to be good, that we had a lot of faith in her, and we had all the data to back it up. And so that made me really grateful that we were able to talk to him early on about, I don't know that he gave any other interviews about why he made the
Yeah.
poster,
Yeah.
or what his reasoning was for the design of it. And it now seems like a long time ago, but that's why it's great to see that he saw the photo that we posted online, kept it, and wanted to include it in his look back at this campaign. So
Yeah.
well done.
You as well, my friend. Thank you for all the work you did putting this together week after week. You know, I'm sure there were times when it felt like, what is the point? You know, but I think that, you know, obviously we're not going to, you know, it's a very easy thing for white guys to pat themselves on the back when something good happens, even if they played, you know, a small part of a bigger thing. But as you said, I think it's so encouraging to know that win or lose, I feel like we were on the right side of history with this. And this whole, you know, campaign has been about hope and the future. And I feel like I feel like tomorrow is going to be the beginning of the next step for our country. And I'm really excited to be, you know, a part of that, a small part.
And the things that we talked about, the issues we've been raising, the outreach to other men, younger men, especially, that will continue. You know, this is definitely the part of you know, the step in a new awareness of how we interact with our own culture and our own population. And so, you know, as I said when we started this, it's like nobody's reaching out to these kinds of guys online. So, you know, the the standards, you know, the expectations are so low,
Right.
you know, that just by starting this conversation, we're doing something. And I do feel like we're just breaking the ice on something that really needed to be addressed. So thanks again. And thank you to everyone who's been listening. So that's White Guys for Kamala. And let's go win this thing.